morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by thanking the organizers, SONDAR and ELSA, who have been big partners of the European Commission for a very long time, for inviting me here. For inviting me here to tell you where do we stand now with soil protection in Europe, and I think more importantly for us is what can we do in the future. Many of you know me because for years I was dealing with the soil framework directive, and then I left for some years to do biodiversity, and now I came back as head of unit, but it was coming back home to pick it up again and continue the fight. Before I get into the soil discussion, I would like to show you here. This is a survey, we call it the Eurobarometer. We do all types of surveys of the European Commission to see what the people think on many issues. This is the general Eurobarometer survey. It was done in the fall 2013. What you have here is we ask the people, what do you think are the two most important issues facing the EU at the moment? And on the top you see by very large, almost half of the people said the economic situation. And the second was the unemployment, 40% saying so. That doesn't really surprise us. But if you see where we stand in terms of people saying climate change and environment, all those where I've circled them in red, and it's basically 4% of the people that said that environment and climate change was an issue that the EU was facing. It was low further than finances, immigration, housing, and of course the economic situation and unemployment. That's for the EU, but if you ask them, what do you think your country, what are the things your country is facing, they basically get the same, unemployment and economic situation far on top, and then environment, climate change around the same. 5% of the people would mention that. This has huge political consequences. It has the consequence that it's very difficult for politicians, and including the European Commission, the European Parliament, the Council, with this huge worry of the citizens, to concentrate on environmental problems, which are farther down. But not only that, it also has the consequence that if we want to do something for environment or climate change, they will immediately tell us, would that have any negative consequence for employment or economics? Because those are on the top. So not only we are not getting the attention, but every time we want to say something, the first question is asked is, would that create jobs, or would that destroy jobs, or would that make the economic situation worse? Because that's at the top of everybody's mind. So that has rendered the debates on environment very difficult across Europe, not only at European level, but at national level, at regional level. And we need to count on this being the same situation still for a number of years. Hopefully things will get better, but maybe not equally fast across the EU. So this is the kind of extremely crisis-driven political environment we're in. The Soil Framework Directive, many of you have worked very hard on this. I think in this room we are all convinced of the need to protect soil, and most, I think, in this room are convinced of the need to protect soil at EU level. Maybe not all of us are in this room, but and for 12 years now, the Commission has been trying to have regulation and legislation on soil, such as we have for air, for water, or for nature. It has been a very difficult political discussion, very difficult discussion, and the Czech colleagues, they suffered it in first hand when they had the presidency, and they really fought hard to try to break the blocking minority. After 8 years of political discussions, where there was an enormous amount of work also outside of the premises of Brussels, really at regional, national and local level to make this happen, after 8 years, we have not managed to break the blocking minority of the 5 countries who were opposing the social directive. In this context of a clear political stalemate, and also the fact that wider discussions on EU intervention, economic crisis, etc., were mixed in October 2013, the Commission started saying, well, we haven't gone anywhere in 8 years. We are going to start considering withdrawing our proposal. Not only the soil, there were a very large number of other proposals on employment, on immigration, on a lot of things which were not going through, the soil being one. But the Commission said, well, there's a lot of proposals which are not getting anywhere. We're going to think of taking them out. Among these long list of proposals the Commission will take out, because they were not going anywhere, it's around 50. The soil was among the most discussed ones within the House. Why so? Because the Commission, at the highest level, the President Barroso, was still committed thinking, we still think this is needed, we still think we need to do this, but we are not going anywhere. So it was, of all the 50 things that were taken out, this was by far the ones most discussed. Should we really take it out? At that stage, it was right before the German elections. So the Commission gave the signal, we are considering taking it out of the table. But we know that things may change in Germany, so we're going to give ourselves some months. It was clear, and I don't hide anything, that the position of Germany in this whole debate is crucial. So a new government in Germany could have changed maybe the stance of Germany and then break the blocking minority. That didn't really happen, so we realized that we would still be having this 5 member states blocking minority. So all this gets us to last week, the Commission decided to withdraw a number of proposals, including the Soil Framework Directive. These will be published in the official journal, which means that there will not be any more a proposal from the Commission on a law on soil. But at the same time that we will be publishing this in the official journal, we would also be saying that we are convinced that this needs to be done, and we will come back. We will come back with the next Commissioner. Of course, we need to see who will be the President of the Commission, the new President, who will be our Commissioner. So all these things are incognitas for the moment. And we will need to see if she or he, how he wants to handle this file. But the message from the Commission leaving, so Barroso and all the other colleagues, is we still are convinced this needs to be done. We take this one out because we see that it's blocking the road for discussion. With this thing on the table, we're not going anywhere, so we'll take it out and start afresh. But I would like to highlight the fact that the Commission remains convinced that there are transboundary effects to soil degradation, that things are getting worse, and that we certainly need to regulate this at the EU level. But we have to learn, and also ourselves, from the Commission side, we have to learn from what could have gone wrong, what did go wrong in these 8 years. How didn't we manage to break the blocking minority? Why, with such thing that was on our eyes, obvious the need, we didn't manage to bring it through? And that's why I wanted to focus a bit with you on what can we do things differently when the discussion starts again. In addition to this, I will not hide to you that withdrawing, there are two proposals, which have been withdrawn of environment in that list. One is the soil, and one was access to justice. And access to justice was also an extremely sensitive proposal which was giving access to NGOs or any interested party to challenge the decision by a public authority in court. So you can imagine how sensitive that other proposal was. For the Commission to take out of the table these two proposals, it has been very traumatic. So we want to make sure that we don't get ourselves into that situation again. There are many things happening at the same time as the issue of the withdrawal. We have the Resource Efficiency Roadmap, which is a key flagship initiative of the European Commission, and there we see land and soil as a crucial resource in the EU that needs to be protected, and it calls for having targets on soil erosion, soil organic matter, on non-net land take by 2050. So there's a lot of political strategic visions. They are not binding, but they are creating a vision on how to have a more resource-efficient economy and society in the EU. We also have a lot of things happening, much more than before in the last 2 years at international level. In the Rio +20 conference, we also could see the land and soil degradation coming up very, very strongly in the international arena, more so than in previous years. So we do have this commitment by the Rio +20, by the whole international community, to start to achieve a land degradation neutral world. Of course, land degradation neutral world, you have to define what is land, what is degradation, what is neutral, and almost what is world. So everything is to be worked on, but the political ambition is there. And then we also have the 7th Environmental Action Programme, which basically is the program that says what the EU will do on environment in the next 10 years. This is a document which is adopted by Council and Parliament, so it's fully backed by the co-legislators. And there it talks about coming up with a legally binding framework for soil and also targets on land take and a number of crucial soil issues. So there are many things happening politically at the same time, which should help us. So what are we going to do next? We're going to follow up. We're going to discuss with the new commissioner and the new commission what can we bring in terms of an alternative initiative for soil. But at the same time, we want to start discussing and working on the land take. Land take meaning, roughly, we're talking about land used for settlements, be it infrastructure or housing. So basically the conversion of natural areas into anthropogenic areas. We want to keep the two issues separate. The soil protection, which is a much more qualitative soil quality instrument, from the land take, which is a much more quantity of land that you use for the different purposes. We want to keep these two separate, because although they are very much linked, and I will go through that, politically they are very, very different. We already have a lot of problems that we've seen on protecting soil as an environmental medium. But land, spatial planning and land use is an issue of purely national competence. So there, what we want to do is much more on soft law and guidance and discussion with member states. So we want to keep the two tracks separate, because politically and decisionally they are different, but they are of course very much linked. There's also a lot of things going on, and I will get into that on the biodiversity agenda, which I will want to make the links here because it's very important. We will have the International Year of Soils, and I will get back to this. And as I said, there are many things happening in the international arena which we are following. And where we see countries like Germany, and I'm sorry to always be banging on Germany, but I think I can afford it, Germany is very keen to do all types of things at international level on land protection and soil degradation, but maybe less so at the European level. The land communication, what we want to do with that land communication, it's embedded in the resource efficiency. We want people to start seeing land as a finite resource. It's a finite resource. We have the land we have in Europe, and we will not get any more than that unless we start like the Dutch building on the sea. But other than that, we got the land we got, and that's as much as we're going to get. As Mark Twain said, buy it because they don't make it anymore. So we need to handle it as a finite resource in terms of sustainable and rational land use decisions. We realize that we are very crowded, it's a very densely populated continent, so the competing demands for land are enormous and are going to be increasing. So we need to first put in the mind of the politicians and decision makers, this needs to be handled in a much more strategic and rational way. And if you seal or make settlements in hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hectares, you are going to lock the land use for decades, if not hundreds of years in that, and you will not be able to use that land for anything else. So to what extent, in such a crowded place as Europe, can we use land in a more multifunctional way? And also to realize that land use and spatial planning issues are looked at, are dealt at very local level in the European. It's municipalities, it's sometimes regions, but so we are at our stage very, very far away from those decision making. So to what extent would the EU have an added value here? That's something that we were going to be discussing. But the moment land as a space and land as a support for many activities is realized as a finite resource, this would have knock-on effects on soil and the soil quality, because the soil quality you have determines the kind of land use you can have. If you have a healthy soil, you can have a lot of land uses. If you don't have a healthy soil, the possibilities of land use then get diminished. So, and if we start saying land is a resource, and we start thinking about it as if it was a raw material, so you want to recycle land, you want the land that you're using, recycle it back, so a huge push for brownfield redevelopment. That would have knock-on effects on soil remediation, because for brownfield redevelopment, you will need to remediate a lot of those contaminated soils. So there will be knock-on effects on the soil. So the communication on land, which we are working on in parallel to the soil protection initiative, would also be coming hopefully next year. It's an area which is not easy politically to get into, so we will also need to see the courage, political courage of our new commissioner and what his or her views are. It will of course have the land take issue, but also the land degradation and the efficiency of land use in the picture. And the last thing is to bring to the attention that the EU is relying on a lot of hectares outside. We have what we call a huge virtual imports, land imports, because through our consumption and production patterns, we are relying on a lot of land outside. If we didn't have that land outside, providing us a lot of things, we would not be able to have the kind of economy we have now. So we need to bring into the picture the realization that we rely on a lot of land outside of the EU. Another issue that we need, so this is one thing that could change the discussion, we think, for the soil. Another thing that could change the discussion when we will have it again on the soil is the whole biodiversity agenda. The biodiversity agenda we see politically is much more advanced than the soil. There's a much more bigger NGO involvement, citizens involvement, awareness of politicians, a willingness of politicians to appear as biodiversity guardians than soil guardians. We need to make links with the biodiversity agenda, which is politically much more advanced than ours. And there are many things happening there which are parallel to what we're doing or we should be doing. One of them is when they protect species and frogs and birds, they have the same question. It's the crisis. How many jobs would get me to to protect this amphibian. All this has led an enormous amount of money to be put on what we call the economics of biodiversity and ecosystem services. So it's to give a prize to nature and what nature gives us. There's been an enormous amount of money poured into that exercise in order to talk to the politicians in such a crisis situation in the language they want to hear, which is how much money I'm losing when I lose biodiversity. And this was very, very, very successful, because when we adopted the biodiversity new targets for 2020, it was under the situation where we had failed to reach the 2010, and we were already in the middle of the crisis. But there were a huge amount of reports and articles saying how much the loss of biodiversity was costing the European Union. The same exercise is going on in Germany for soil, and it's the economics of land degradation. It's not a commission-driven exercise, but it's one on which we are keeping an eye, because it's very much bringing in the economics of this hidden degradation that nobody is counting on in the economics of the country. Also, they are binding targets